Morgan Jacks walked into his daughter's school cafeteria, expecting to surprise her with lunch. What he found instead would change everything. His little girl, Agnes, only 7 years old, was down on her knees scraping food off the filthy tile floor with shaking fingers. A bigger boy loomed above her, smirking like he owned the world. 10 feet away, a teacher stood with her arms folded tight, watching it all and doing nothing. Absolutely nothing. Morgan didn't scream. He didn't storm across the room. He just froze, staring, because in that single heartbeat a father's worst fear became real, and the deathbed promise he'd made to his wife shattered into 1,000 pieces. What happened next brought 200 Hell's Angels to the front steps of that school. But they didn't ride in for vengeance. They rode in for something the town never saw coming. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. You're gonna want to see how this ends. The cafeteria reeked of bleach and soggy tater tots. The lunch rush had already cleared out. Most kids were back in class. But in the far corner by the emergency exit, a nightmare was playing out in slow motion. Agnes Jacks, 7 years old with her mama's soft brown eyes and her daddy's stubborn chin, knelt beside an overturned pink lunch tray. Milk bled across the floor in pale rivers. A bruised apple rolled against the wall. Her sandwich lay flattened like roadkill. Above her stood Evan Marsh, 12, thick-shouldered, wearing the kind of grin that says cruelty is a sport and he's the undisputed champion. "You people don't deserve real food," he sneered. "Pick it up. That's all you're good for." Agnes said nothing. She had already learned that silence sometimes feels safer than tears. Her tiny hands shook so hard she could barely grasp a soggy slice of bread. 10 feet away, Mrs. Linda Dorsey, cafeteria supervisor, kept her arms locked across her chest. She saw everything. She did nothing. Then the double doors swung open. Morgan Jacks, 44, 6'2", salt and pepper beard, leather vest that read Hell's Angels, Texas, stepped inside carrying a grilled cheese sandwich wrapped in foil. The kind of small, ordinary daddy surprise most families take for granted. The sandwich fell from his hand and hit the floor with a soft thud. Every muscle in his body coiled, screaming for action. He pictured himself crossing the room in 3 strides, lifting that smirking boy off the ground by his collar. But then Agnes looked up. There was no relief in her eyes. Only shame, the kind that makes a child feel like she's the one who did something wrong. "Daddy," she whispered, voice cracking. "He keeps doing it. He kicked my tray again. Again." That single word hit Morgan harder than any fist ever could. He turned to Mrs. Dorsey. Her arms dropped. Her face went stiff. "Mr. Jacks," she started, calm as thin ice. "Children will be children. Agnes needs to learn to stand up for herself." "How long?" Morgan cut in, voice low. "How long has this been happening?" The silence that followed was louder than any confession. Morgan didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He knelt beside his daughter and started gathering the scattered food with her. "It's okay, baby girl," he murmured. "I'm here now, and this is never, ever happening again." He meant it with every cell in his body, and he had no idea yet just how big that promise was about to become. You might be thinking, a Hell's Angel walks in, sees his little girl humiliated, and his first move is to pick food up off the floor? That's not the reaction most people expect. But Morgan understood something in that moment. Fists might feel good for 30 seconds, but they wouldn't fix what was truly breaking his daughter. To really protect her, he needed something stronger than violence. He needed the truth. And the truth, as he was about to find out, went far deeper than one spoiled bully and one cowardly adult. The life they had and the one that was taken. 18 months earlier, life still made sense. Morgan Jacks lived in Mesa, Arizona, in a little stucco house that always smelled faintly of motor oil and fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. His wife Rebecca ran a tiny bakery downtown. Morgan fixed Harleys alongside his Arizona brothers. They weren't rich, but they were whole. Agnes grew up on the back of her daddy's bike before she could spell her own name, laughing as a dozen leather-clad giants lifted her onto their shoulders and called her princess. She was loud, fearless, stubborn in the sweetest way. She filled every room with sunlight. Then the cough started. Just a dry little thing at first. Desert air, they told themselves. It'll pass. It didn't pass. Stage 4 lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life. 8 months, the doctors said. Rebecca fought for 6. On the night she left, the machines beeped slower and slower. She gripped Morgan's hand with the last strength she had and made him swear, protect her, whatever it takes. She's going to need you to be her whole world now. Morgan had never broken a promise to Rebecca. He wasn't starting the day she died. After the funeral, Arizona turned into a graveyard of memories. Every street, every corner of the house, every smell of cinnamon in the air stabbed him fresh. His Texas brothers saw a man drowning in his own hometown and offered the only lifeline they knew: a fresh start. A job running the chapter's legitimate businesses. Diners, parts distribution, honest work, a new place to breathe. So Morgan packed their life into a pickup, buckled Agnes into the passenger seat, and drove east toward a sunrise that still hurt, but maybe hurt a little less. Grief doesn't vanish. It just changes address. In Texas, Agnes grew quiet. She stopped begging for playdates. She pushed food around her plate. Her shoulders started folding inward like she was trying to take up less space in the world. Morgan told himself it was normal. New town. Lost her mom. She'll come back to life when she's ready. He had no idea she was fighting for her life every single day at Ridgeview Elementary, and that she was doing it alone because she thought telling him might break what little family she had left. That night, after the cafeteria, Morgan sat on the edge of Agnes's bed. The only light came from a tiny crescent moon nightlight. She stared at the ceiling like it might give her permission to speak. "How long, baby girl?" he asked, voice soft enough not to scare the truth away. Long pause. Too long. "Since the first week," she finally whispered. 5 months. 5 months of hell while he kissed her goodbye every morning and told her to have a good day. "Why didn't you tell me?" She turned her face into the pillow so he wouldn't see the tears. "Mommy said you'd protect me, and I didn't want you to fight and get taken away too. I didn't want to lose you." The words crushed him. His 7-year-old had been swallowing terror to keep him safe. He pulled her close, careful, like she might break. "You will never lose me, but I need you to tell me everything. Every single thing." And then it spilled out. The name she was called, orphan girl, biker trash, the tripping in hallways, the water poured on her chair, the lunch trays kicked across the floor week after week, how she learned to eat fast in hidden corners. And the adults, teachers, monitors, even the counselor. Every time she asked for help, she got the same tired lines. "Just stay away from him. Don't give him a reaction. Boys will be boys." Then came the name that made Morgan's blood freeze. Evan's father, Richard Marsh, school board member, biggest donor, the man whose handshake decided who got protected and who got forgotten. When Agnes finally fell asleep, Morgan stepped into the hallway, closed the door, and started making calls. Parents, teachers he trusted. The picture got uglier with every conversation. 12 documented complaints against Evan Marsh in 3 years. 12. And nothing ever stuck. Detentions that vanished. A 1-day suspension. Teachers suddenly reassigned for speaking out of turn. One counselor warned that she was misreading normal boy behavior. Richard Marsh didn't just sit on the board. He owned it. The superintendent owed him. The principal feared him. The budget lived or died by his signature. This wasn't ignorance. This was a choice. And in that moment, Morgan understood. The principal wouldn't fix it. The complaint forms wouldn't fix it. Polite meetings wouldn't fix it. If he wanted his daughter safe, he couldn't walk in alone. He was going to need every single brother he had. You're probably picturing what most people picture. 200 bikes tearing up the street, fists itching, ready to settle things the old way. That's not what happened. Morgan drove to the Devil's Highway Diner, a sun-bleached roadhouse with buzzing neon and a parking lot full of Harleys lined up like soldiers. To outsiders, it looked like trouble. To Morgan, it was church. Inside, the air was thick with coffee and engine grease. Marcus "Tank" Williams held court in the corner booth. A mountain of a man with a gray beard and eyes that had buried a daughter to a drunk driver 20 years ago. Tank had turned that pain into a vow. No child on his watch would ever be left behind again. Morgan told him everything. The cafeteria floor, the 5 months, the name Richard Marsh. Tank's knuckles went white around his coffee mug. "You sure you want the club in this, brother?" "I don't want it," Morgan said. "I need it. If I go through the proper channels, they'll bury it again. They've been burying kids for years." Tank studied him for a long moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "What exactly are you asking for?" Morgan didn't want blood. He wanted something the school couldn't ignore. 200 of us show up to the next board meeting. Peaceful. Cameras rolling. Phones out. Let the whole town see what happens when they finally have to look a 7-year-old in the eye and explain why she doesn't matter. Tank's slow nod was all it took. That night, the clubhouse filled. Almost 100 members, men and women who'd walked through fire and rebuilt themselves, stood shoulder to shoulder while Morgan told Agnes's story. When he spoke Rebecca's name and the promise she dragged out of him with her dying breath, you could hear grown men swallow tears. The vote wasn't even a vote. It was a roar. 200 riders. Not for war, for witness. Tank started assigning roles like a general before battle. 3 members with law degrees would dig through county records. A former journalist would handle the press. Logistics would map every route to keep it legal, quiet, and impossible to spin. Others would gently collect stories from every child too scared to speak before now. This wasn't rage anymore. This was precision. If you're still here, you already know this story matters. Smash that subscribe button, because what happens when 200 engines fire up at dawn for a little girl is something you'll never forget. Morgan woke long before sunrise. He checked on Agnes first. She slept curled tight, clutching the stuffed bear her mama had sewn for her. He kissed her forehead, then stepped into the pre-dawn chill. The staging area was an abandoned lot on the edge of town. When he rolled in, his breath caught. 200 motorcycles stood in perfect rows, chrome catching the first bruise-colored hint of light. Tank stood at the front, immovable. Next to him, Elena Stitch Rodriguez, still in pediatric scrubs under her cut after pulling an all-night shift in the ER. Robert Gospel Miller, ex-pastor who traded the pulpit for a panhead but never stopped believing people could be better. And hundreds more. Nurses, mechanics, veterans, mothers, fathers, every one of them written off by the world as dangerous until this moment. 200 people the world called outlaws, standing in the cold for a child most of them had never met. At 6 a.m. sharp, Tank raised one massive hand. 200 engines snarled awake. The sound rolled across the empty fields like the sky itself was tearing open. House lights snapped on for miles. Dogs lost their minds. They pulled out in perfect formation, half a mile of thunder riding for justice instead of chaos. People came out of gas stations and front porches, phones already recording. Some waved. Some just stared, trying to make sense of the impossible sight. By 6:45, the column reached Ridgeview Elementary. They did not circle the building. They did not rev engines or shout. They parked in the overflow lot across the street, cut the motors, and stood in silence. 200 riders, hands visible, vests clean, faces calm, just waiting. Inside, the principal saw them through her blinds and went ghost white. She grabbed the phone. "There's a gang outside. Hundreds of them. Send police now." For cruisers screamed in, lights flashing. Sheriff Tucker stepped out, hand near his holster, expecting the worst. Tank walked forward, palms open. Sheriff Tucker, Marcus Williams, we're here for the emergency board meeting this afternoon. Until then, we'll wait right here peacefully, making sure every kid who walks through those doors feels safe, especially one. The sheriff looked over 200 silent riders and realized he wasn't looking at a threat. He was looking at a promise. And the day had only just begun. While 200 riders stood like statues in the overflow lot, something shifted inside Ridgeview Elementary. Agnes woke to a house that felt different. No distant rumble of her dad's bike fading down the road. Instead, Morgan was already dressed, leaning against the kitchen counter, waiting for her. "Daddy, aren't you going to work?" "Not today, baby girl. Today, I'm taking you to school myself." The sentence was quiet, but it landed like armor around her heart. On the drive, she clutched her backpack like a shield. When they turned the corner, she saw them. Row after row of gleaming bikes, leather vests catching the early sun, riders standing tall and still. "Daddy, are those?" "Those are my brothers and sisters, sweetheart. They're here so you never have to be afraid again." Morgan parked, took her hand, and walked her straight through the line of riders. And then the moment that would live in her forever. Every single biker straightened as she passed. Some gave a small nod. Some touched 2 fingers to their hearts. One by one, they honored her. Elena Stitch Rodriguez dropped to one knee, scrubs peeking from under her cut. "Hey, brave girl. I'm Stitch. I'm a nurse. And I need you to know something. What you survived would break most adults. But you're still here. That makes you one of us." She pressed a tiny silver guardian angel pin into Agnes's palm, wings warm from her own hand. "Wear this today. And any day you feel small, remember you've got 200 people right outside who've got your back." Agnes pinned it to her sweater. When she walked through the school doors, her shoulders weren't curled anymore. Her chin was up. For the first time in 5 months, she didn't feel invisible. By second period, the whispers were everywhere. "Is it true? All those bikers? They're here for Agnes." By lunch, 6 other kids had quietly come to her table. They had stories too. Evan Marsh had terrorized half the school, and every one of them had been told to just deal with it. The culture of cruelty had thrived because no one ever thought anyone would show up. Now someone had. Across the street, the legal team, 3 Hells Angels with JDS and steel in their eyes, were already deep in county records. At 2 p.m., they came back to the lot carrying banker boxes and grim faces. Tank met them. "How bad?" "Worse than bad," one said. "This isn't one bully with a powerful daddy. This is a decade of complaints disappearing. Teachers threatened, donor kids untouchable. They built a system that decides which children are worth protecting and which ones get thrown away." Tank looked at Morgan. "We don't just have a story anymore. We have proof." By 3 p.m., local news vans rolled in, cameras hungry for the spectacle of 200 bikers outside an elementary school. Carol Inc. Torres, former investigative reporter turned patch holder, stepped forward before anyone could spin it wrong. She handed every reporter a thick packet. Redacted complaints, deleted digital logs, sworn statements from silenced teachers, testimonies from children. Cold, hard, impossible to deny evidence. By the 5 o'clock news, the headline wasn't "Biker Gang Threatens School." It was "Grassroots Investigation Exposes Years of Protected Bullying at Ridgeview Elementary." The binders of truth were on every screen next to the leather vests. And the town finally had to look at what it had allowed. The emergency school board meeting that night wasn't a meeting anymore. It was a reckoning. By 6 p.m., the little Ridgeview boardroom, built for 50 polite parents, was drowning. 300 people packed the hallways, spilled onto the sidewalk, filled every inch of oxygen. Reporters, furious parents, shaken teachers, wide-eyed kids, and 200 Hells Angels in clean shirts and polished boots standing shoulder to shoulder like a living wall of quiet thunder. They didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their presence alone made the air feel heavier. Richard Marsh sat dead center at the long table, knuckles white, jaw locked so tight it looked painful. He had expected a few angry voices, maybe a viral clip he could spin. He had not expected the entire town to rise up at once. The meeting opened with the usual script: community concerns, safety updates, recent events. Then the dam broke. A mother stood first, voice trembling as she read from a stack of emails that had vanished into thin air after she complained about her son being slammed into lockers. Another parent, then another. Years of swallowed pain poured out like floodwater. A 12-year-old boy in taped-up glasses took the mic next. He told them how Evan Marsh snapped his frames in half and called him slurs, while a counselor suggested he think about what he might be doing to provoke it. Two former teachers, invited by the legal team, spoke next. Calm, measured, devastating. They laid out the pressure to change grades, the warnings not to discipline certain students, the sudden reassignments that felt a lot like punishment. Then Morgan Jack stood. No drama, no raised voice, just a father in a leather vest who looked every person in the room dead in the eye. My wife died asking me to protect our daughter. I thought that meant food on the table and a roof overhead. I didn't know it would mean fighting an entire system that decided a 7-year-old eating off the floor was acceptable collateral damage. He let that settle. For 5 months, my little girl learned to hide in corners because the adults paid to keep her safe looked the other way. Some of you in this room are mad we showed up tonight. You call it intimidation. Let me tell you what intimidation really feels like. It's a child bracing for her tray to be kicked every single day while grown-ups pretend they don't see. He sat down. The room was so quiet you could hear hearts breaking. Richard Marsh leaned into his microphone, voice cold and clipped. Mr. Jacks, bringing a motorcycle gang to a school board meeting is hardly appropriate. Tank's voice cut through like a blade, calm but unbreakable. We have documentation of 12 families who used every appropriate channel with your son, Mr. Marsh. Every single one hit a dead end. Funny how that keeps happening. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the sound of a town realizing the mask had finally come off. By the end of the night, 3 board members quietly announced they'd be spending more time with family. The dominoes weren't just tipping, they were crashing, and the whole country was watching. 72 hours later, Ridgeview was no longer a sleepy Texas town. It was front page, prime time everywhere. Footage of 200 silent riders standing guard outside an elementary school rolled on loop across the country. The image of grown men and women on their knees to pin a tiny guardian angel on a terrified 7-year-old cracked every stereotype wide open. People who'd never heard of Ridgeview before watched in stunned silence. Not a single fist raised. Not one threat shouted. Just protection, raw and undeniable. The packets of evidence, disappeared complaints, sealed files, deleted logs, were dissected on every major network. What started as one little girl's nightmare exposed a decade of engineered cruelty. State investigators descended. The school board went into emergency closed session and still couldn't stop the bleeding. Richard Marsh hired a crisis PR firm. The move backfired instantly. Innocent men don't need spin doctors. By Friday, exactly 1 week after Morgan saw his daughter on her knees, the consequences landed hard and clean. Mrs. Linda Dorsey was fired. Records showed she'd watched at least 3 separate attacks and never filed a single report. Superintendent Hobbs resigned for personal reasons. An audit later revealed he personally approved the sealing of 7 donor-related complaints. 3 board members, including Richard Marsh, stepped down to avoid formal proceedings. Evan Marsh was suspended indefinitely, mandated into intensive counseling, and barred from every unsupervised space on campus. No arrests, no violence, no threats, just truth organized and delivered so cleanly the system had nowhere left to hide. The following weekend, the writers came back, this time with a check for $42,000 raised from chapters all over Texas. They didn't come to gloat, they came to rebuild. The money paid for free breakfast and lunch for every student the rest of the year, New cafeteria tables, proper lighting, overdue repairs, and a real anti-bullying program designed with actual child psychologists. They launched Angel's Watch, vetted members rotating through morning drop-off and afternoon pickup. A quiet, visible shield that made predators think twice and made every kid feel seen. Ridgeview didn't just change overnight. It was reborn. And the country watched a group of people the world had labeled dangerous choose restoration over destruction. Every single time. 2 weeks later, Agnes walked back into Ridgeview Elementary a different girl. The guardian angel pin glinted on her sweater like a tiny beacon. She didn't clutch her backpack like a life raft anymore. She didn't scan the hallway for threats. She just walked, hand in Morgan's, shoulders back, eyes forward. Kids who once looked through her now waved. A girl from her class offered a shy smile. A teacher she barely knew crouched down and asked, "How are you today, sweetheart?" Like she actually wanted the answer. At lunch, Agnes did something that would have been impossible a month earlier. She chose a table right in the middle of the cafeteria, no corner, no emergency exit hiding spot. She opened her lunch slowly, without bracing for impact. 3 kids approached. "Can we sit with you?" She nodded, and the smile that came was real, small, but real. They talked about homework and dogs and weekend plans. Nothing earth-shattering. But for Agnes it was everything. She felt her chest loosen, her breathing slow. She felt 7 again. That evening, father and daughter sat on the porch swing under a Texas sky bleeding orange and rose. A distant Harley rumbled like a lullaby. Agnes leaned into Morgan's side. "Daddy, are we safe here now?" He wrapped his arm tighter. "We're safe, baby girl. Nobody's going to hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing. Not while my family rides with me." A long quiet, then softer than the wind. "I miss Mommy." Morgan's throat closed. "Me too. Every single day." She looked up at the first stars. "Do you think she saw?" He followed her gaze. "I think she always knew you'd have an army. She just didn't know they'd be wearing leather and patches." Agnes let out a tiny, contented sigh and settled against him. The swing creaked back and forth like a heartbeat finally at rest. For the first time since Rebecca slipped away, peace felt possible. A year flew by. Ridgeview Elementary was unrecognizable. Bullying reports dropped 78%, not because kids stopped talking, but because adults finally started listening. Angel's Watch became permanent. 3 neighboring districts started copying the model. Evan Marsh, after real counseling and a transfer, wrote Agnes a letter at 15. Short, clumsy, but honest. An apology that belonged to him, not his father. Richard Marsh sold everything and left the state. The shadow he'd cast over the school lifted the day he drove away. Mrs. Dorsey took a desk job somewhere private. Some lessons are carried silently. And Morgan? Every first Monday of the month, he showed up in the first-grade classroom. Leather vest traded for a soft flannel. Reading stories cross-legged on the rug. The kids just called him Mr. Jacks, the reading guy. Agnes turned 9. She played softball, had sleepovers, collected best friends like treasures. She kept the guardian angel pin in a little box on her dresser and wore it on the days she wanted to feel them all close. One afternoon, a new boy from Oklahoma sat alone at lunch, shoulders folded in the way hers once were. Agnes saw him instantly. She walked over, set her tray down and said, "I'm Agnes. Wanna sit with us? It's scary at first, but you're not alone." He looked up, eyes wide, and nodded. In that moment, pain turned into protection. Fear turned into kindness, and the circle completed itself. This story could have ended the way everyone expected it to. A heartbroken biker dad walks into a cafeteria, sees red, and does what the world thinks bikers do. One punch, one threat, one viral fight video. He'd be in handcuffs by sunset. Agnes would be more traumatized. The school would slap a restraining order on him, call him the problem, and everything would stay exactly the same. The system would have won again. But Morgan chose the harder road. He swallowed the rage. He gathered evidence instead of excuses. He brought 200 witnesses instead of weapons. He forced a corrupt machine to look at itself in the mirror and watch the reflection crack. He didn't just save his daughter. He saved every kid who'd been told their pain didn't matter because of whose last name was on the donation plaque. That's the real power in this story. Not the bikes, not the leather, not the roar of engines at dawn. The power was ordinary people refusing to stay quiet. The power was grown men and women who'd been judged their whole lives deciding that today they would stand between one little girl and the darkness. The power was choosing truth over fists, light over shadows, healing over vengeance. And because they did, a town changed. A school changed. Children who once walked in fear now walk in feeling seen. And Agnes, sweet, stubborn Agnes, became the kind of person who spots the new kid eating alone and makes sure he never has to. There are little Agneses everywhere right now. In your kid's classroom, on your street, in the back row of the bus with shoulders curled in and eyes that don't quite meet yours. They're carrying things too heavy for their size, and most of them believe no one will come if they scream. You don't need 200 motorcycles to change that. You just need one adult who notices. One adult who asks the question that makes a child feel seen. One adult who refuses to look away. That's how every big story like this one actually starts. With someone ordinary choosing to be uncomfortable instead of complicit. So here's my last question to you. When the moment comes, and it always does, whose Agnes will you stand for? Drop a comment and tell me who stood for you when you needed it most. Or tell me what you needed someone to do when no one did. And if the story hit you in the chest the way it hit me telling it, do 3 things. Hit subscribe because I'm going to keep telling stories about the people who choose courage when silence would have been easier. Share this with one person who needs to remember that protectors still exist. Then go be one. Because the world doesn't change when 200 bikes roll up. It changes when one person decides a child's pain is no longer acceptable. Thank you for riding with Agnes all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.